So let's go ahead and get started here. Make sure it goes. All right. So first, just really quick, we'll touch on a little bit of anatomy for the heart. Pretty basic. Okay. What is the heart? So without the heart, brain, muscle, nothing in our body would function. Pretty much the main takeaway. So if you look at the heart here, the blue side, okay, right atrium, right ventricle, that's where all that blood that has been, all the oxygen is used out of it. Okay, so that blood that's not rich in a lot of things comes through the right side of your heart, right atrium, down into the right ventricle. So superior and inferior vena cava. So that comes from all the muscles and everything from your body, comes down, comes up, and then that's going to go out through the pulmonary arteries to the lungs to get reoxygenated. Okay. And then we'll come back in, boom. Okay. Like it says there, ventricles or in the atrium, always goes in the atrium first, out through the ventricle. That's the aorta. So the aorta distributes it to the rest of your body after it's got all that nice oxygen after it came from the lungs. Okay. Just fun little stat. Heart pumps 2.5 billion times in a lifetime, transfers millions of gallons of bodies gallons of blood to all over our body. Okay. But in general, right side of the heart, getting that blood from the body when it's not oxygenated, okay, and then working its way through the lungs to get oxygenated again, get all those nutrients ready to go to the rest of the body. Okay. So now, one of the main reasons we all, I think, train, obviously like to build muscle, want to just be overall healthy. As we get older, cardiovascular disease becomes more and more prominent, more and more risk. Obviously, we all probably have family or loved ones that have been affected by it as well. So genetics can even come into it as well. So just touching on the different types of cardiovascular disease. Um, in general, coronary artery disease, so that's going to be plaque buildup that because there's so much plaque, the arteries are narrower, so less blood can flow there. You can see on the image what kind of how plaque obstructs the blood flow, and how at some point can get to that near what they would consider a complete blockage. Um, so most common form of cardiovascular disease is that coronary artery disease, so which is that plaque buildup. That's the leading cause of death in America today. Um, a lot of these, stroke, so that's when blood flow to a part of your brain is cut off. We have heart attacks or sudden coronary artery blockage that cuts off oxygen to part of the muscles of the heart. We have arrhythmias, so your heartbeat is too fast or too slow or beats in a weird rhythm that throws off the blood flow. Congenital heart disease, this is something that develops before birth, and cardiomyopathy. So myo, if you ever see that prefix, usually means muscle. So unusual thickening or enlargement of your heart muscle. Your heart is basically a big muscle, right? A lot of nerves and stuff going into it. So when we talk about like the plaques and the coronary artery disease, since that is the most common, usually that's going to impact with that narrowing. It's going to cause the whole heart to function improperly, from the muscles to the valves. So on that one picture, you could see there's valves that open and close to prevent backflow. So that's when a lot of issues come in. When those valves aren't working properly, blood can flow backwards. That's obviously not what we want to happen. With coronary artery disease, a lot of us hear about, and probably, know people who already have this, or we even have some of that high blood pressure, blood clots, obviously, like we mentioned, any blockage of blood flow can put you at an increased risk of some of these other things as well. So that coronary artery disease can lead to an increased chance of stroke or heart attack. Okay, so it's not a kind of one sum game here. Stroke is the second leading cause of death amongst these as well. So with the arrhythmias a little bit more in depth, we obviously have atrial fibrillation, we have a flutter, so kind of on and off. And some of these severe cases can, again, go back to causing a stroke or some of these other things happening. And then let's see, touched on the part of cardiomyopathy. Again, your heart, basically one big muscle with a tons of nerves going in it. So that rhythm is very important to make sure we're keeping the blood going from the atriums to the ventricles, and so those valves are opening properly and not having any backflow. Okay, so let's go ahead. Risk factors real quick. I think most of us kind of know these. We touched about genetics or family history, your age, your gender, some of these things we can't do anything about, right? But things like smoking, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, a lot of these things we can control by how active we are. Obviously, alcohol, we can control that. Our diet and our nutrition, we can control that as well. In general, when it comes to gender, I wanted to call out males do tend to be at a higher risk for heart issues. And then touching on cholesterol here, because I think that's a really big topic that a lot of us start to pay attention to, especially as we get older. Trying to keep a total cholesterol under 200 is always kind of a good goal. Once you start getting to 20, 230, 240, that's considered high. Then we have two types of cholesterol. We have HDL and LDL, so high and low density. HDL, that's considered kind of your good cholesterol. So we actually want higher numbers of that. Above 60 is usually what you're trying to aim for there. And then LDL, that bad cholesterol, we want to keep that under 100. And then triglycerides, a form of fat, less than 149. So these are all things that if you get blood work done, it's usually on those panels. Pretty common information. And I can send out any of these notes if you're looking for specific numbers too. Getting into blood pressure, I think 120 over 80 is pretty. Are you raising your hand or stretching? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, 120 over 80. Again, kind of the ideal range, blood pressure. Anything over 130 is when you start to see a little concerned. Yeah, go ahead. Yep. Exercise and diet are going to be the two biggest ones for sure. Um, yeah, good question. And then, so back into the blood pressure, once you start getting 130 or above to that systolic number, and just so you know, these numbers are the pressure inside your veins and your arteries, like what, just like a pipe with water flowing through it, what is that pressure? When the heart's pumping and when the heart's not. Basically, when it's beating and when it's in between a beat. So and then above 180 for diastolic, which is the bottom number, or above 80, which is the diastolic number, that bottom number, that would be considered high BP. So over 130-ish and then over 80-ish on either of those numbers. So 120 over 80 systolic, diastolic would be considered high blood pressure. Again, we talked about family history. That's not anything we control. Today, we're going to try to focus on the things we can control. And then obviously touch on smoking. I think we're obviously in a society where it tends to be decreasing a bit. But a little bit more hygiene, a little bit more relevance with younger kids and vaping and stuff like that. So I think it still is very relevant, but even this is a little bit of an older stat when smoking is more relevant, but even people who smoke fewer than 5 cigarettes a day may show signs of early cardiovascular disease. So any of those things that we talked about, the risk of CVD increases with the number of cigarettes smoked per day and when smoking continues on top of each other for many years. So an accumulation issue. If you feel like any of these, that are uncontrolled or controlled, obviously stuff that we can control, TJ and I can help with is fitness stuff, right? And TJ's a nutrition coach. If you have concerns about your diet and how that could be affecting your HDL, your LDL, your triglycerides, have a chat with TJ, email us. Any of those other things, obviously, we're going to want to consult a doctor and your physician, when it comes to like high blood pressure and stuff like that. So let's get into exercise a little bit. So quickly just describing kind of the two types of our exercise states, if you will. So we have aerobic and anaerobic, okay? So aerobic is what we think of when it comes to walking, jogging, cardio, quote unquote. So basically aero means with oxygen. So we need oxygen to generate the energy in our body, okay? So again, endurance type of exercise in which a person's muscles move in a rhythmic, coordinated manner for a sustained period of time. The biggest thing to just note is it's kind of that more endurance, longer sessions. And then again, kind of like that handout says, we need oxygen to generate the energy necessary. Okay, anaerobic without another. You'll see all the Latin prefixes here. So that means without oxygen. So these are those short, intense bursts of physical activity, sprinting, super heavy weightlifting. The body's going to break down glucose stores without oxygen. And this is going to, when you start to feel that lactic acid buildup, that's what's happening there. Okay. Benefits with exercise. I think we all kind of know most of these here, pretty self-explanatory. But in regards to what we're talking about today, a stronger heart. When your heart's stronger, it can push out more blood with each beat, right? And in return, it's going to actually slow your heart rate down, right? Because it's able to send more blood in one stronger, bigger pump. It doesn't have to beat as many times per second. So that's in turn going to lower your blood pressure. Okay. Studies have shown that an individual fitness level, where your cardiorespiratory is at, all those things, is a more important predictor of death than kind of some of those established risks. So benefits of exercise: improved blood flow, just touched on that, reducing risk of blood clots, lowering that blood pressure, which again we talked about, and then we mentioned LDL, HDL. Again, TJ's trick, we want to boost our HDL and lower our LDL, lessening the risk of diabetes. So that's a disease we didn't touch on today, related to insulin sensitivity, and then obviously manage our weight, which is why a lot of us exercise. So now let's get into a little bit more of the meat potatoes, heart rate training. Okay. So you'll see different percentages all over the place. This is a general scale, usually 5 zones. You usually want to incorporate this with an RPE scale, that's rate of perceived exertion, and you're going to see different ones of those too. The old school, it's called the Borg scale. I think it starts at a 6 and goes above 10. It's kind of a weird scale, but most of us just relate it to a 1 to 10 scale, so that's kind of how heart rate training and a rate of perceived exertion go together. So again, overall theme with heart rate training is being aware and tracking your heart rate within a certain range during your workout. So that range, you'll see 50 to 60%, for example, of your max heart rate. So it's basically the range expressed as a percentage of your maximum heart rate. Again, maximum heart rate, pretty self-explanatory. The greatest number of times your heart is physically able to beat in a minute. Okay, so there's really no exact science other than you need to go to a doctor and do like a VO2 max test and stuff like that. A lot of expensive equipment is required to get your true HR max. Today, I'll give you some good ways that you can estimate your max heart rate. Okay. So again, retouch on, it's a great way to track your intensity and improve all aspects of your cardiovascular fitness. So like that sheet says, not just your anaerobic, not just your aerobic, all three, trying to get all three forms, and when might you need a rest day? When are you okay to maybe take it up a notch? Some of these devices like Apple Watches and Whoops and stuff like that do some awesome job, especially Whoop, telling you how well your body is recovered and if you're ready for another higher intensity workout. And that all this is to help you avoid overtraining, right? Because we've all been there. Amy, I know you were talking about how sore you were after a workout the other day, and then it kind of almost sets you back where like you feel like you can't do something for a couple days. So we want to avoid that kind of stuff so we can stay consistent with our routines. So getting into each zone a little bit, again, you might see different percentages out there. This is a little bit rough or just something that Exos has on file. Okay. So zone 1, 50 to 60%. This is very light. This is maybe when we do stretch breaks and we're sitting there doing some static stretching, very light warm-ups, very light cool downs. I wouldn't say this is just sitting on the TV or sitting on the couch watching TV. It's definitely a step above that, but this is something that maybe you're just walking at a really slow pace or you're just doing some stretching. This is something that you could just do for hours on end. No problem having a conversation. You might hear me mention the conversation part a few times. That's kind of a common theme on an RPE scale, the rate of perceived exertion. Like, can you maintain a conversation? And that's kind of how you can, maybe if you don't have your Apple Watch for the day or something, you forgot it, this can help you realize what zone you might be in. So again, can improve your overall health, but I wouldn't say it's going to improve your fitness, right? We're not getting any really cardio work, cardiorespiratory fitness by staying in zone one when we're just sitting there static stretching, right? It's basically how almost we are sitting throughout the day, going about our life, but definitely increases blood flow. We know that with stretching and foam rolling and stuff like that, which is great for recovery. Okay, zone two, so stepping it up a bit, maybe 2 to 4 on the RP scale, 60 to 70% of your max heart rate. Might start to see some light sweating here. We call this sustainable aerobic training. So again, you couldn't do it all day, but you could do this for an hour, 2 hours, something like that. 30 to 90-minute workouts. Great for your endurance, right? So part of a marathon training would definitely be training in this state. This helps build mitochondria, building those slow twitch muscle fibers. So those muscles that need to last a very long time when you're working out. So it's not your fast twitch like muscles in your calves when you're sprinting or cutting in and out during a sport. It's those big muscles that require a lot of slow energy to burn. Okay. Zone three, now we're stepping up 70 to 80%, stepping up on the RP scale. When you start to get to the 6 and the 7, when you're feeling that, it might start to feel a bit challenging, but still doable. Like you could do this for upwards of an hour, 30 to 60 minutes, 30 to 40 minutes. You'd consider this moderate, still aerobic here. Once you start getting 80%-ish, we might start to reach that anaerobic threshold that we talk about on that sheet and that we'll talk about here. And you might, towards the end of your workout, start to feel some lactic acid buildup. So benefits here, improving the efficiency of your blood flow in the heart, and then also getting that blood out to your muscles. Okay, this can build strength and build speed as well when incorporated kind of towards that higher end in a little bit shorter duration when you're talking about speed specifically. Zone 4, okay, 80 to 90%. Oh, yes. Yeah, so burning when those glucose reserves get start becoming the fuel source. Again, there's different energy systems. That's what all those three things are talking about. When you start to switch into burning glucose and that all the byproducts, if you will, of that energy process happening, that's when you start to feel the lactic acid buildup. It's not a bad thing. It just means you're going to need it. Basically, more lactic acid, the more recovery time you're going to need. So making sure you're spending time with the foam rolling, stretching to get that blood flow to flush out all that stuff. And so we can start new the next time we work out and we don't have lactic acid sitting around. Anything that's going to help you get more fresh fluids in and out in through there and clear out all the lactic acid that's been sitting in there. Yep. It's not, yeah, it's definitely just kind of a, like we mentioned, a limiting factor at the beginning of working out. If you're not used to pushing yourself to a certain extent, that lactic acid happens earlier and you're sore, even though you might not have felt like you did as much as you used to maybe 10, 15 years ago. And you're like, man, now I'm sore for 2 days. That's kind of why. But once you get back into a workout routine within the first month or so, if you're staying consistent, you start to, that lactic acid threshold gets further and further down the road. So you experience it less and less unless you really keep pushing yourself further and further. Does that make sense? Yeah. So into the 80 to 90% here, zone, what we call zone 4. This is where you're feeling uncomfortable, right? It's hard. You're feeling that lactic acid. 5 to 15 minutes of exercise, not including rest time. So we're starting to get into where you're not just on the treadmill for 30 minutes at the same speed. This is where we're trying to do maybe some interval training and stuff like that, where we're working you hard for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, but then letting you rest for the same amount of time or really short times and keep pushing you and keeping the workout in a shorter duration because you're working so hard in those short intervals. So it touches on mitochondria, but now we're focusing on fast twitch muscles a little bit more. So those are those explosive movements. But I also don't want you to think that these fast twitch muscle fibers are just for like athletes or explosive movements, because what types of muscles do you think work when I'm walking outside and there's a thing of ice and I quickly need to catch myself, right? That's fast twitch muscle. So every age, no matter whether we're playing sports or not, we all need to be able to train those fast twitch muscle fibers to help with balance, fall protection, all that good stuff. Okay. And then again, this is a little bit more geared towards athletes when they talk about boosting performance, building power. But no matter where we are in life, we all need some of these things. Like, yeah, if I'm just training for general health and wellness, I'm 55 years old. Maybe I play some pickup hockey every once in a while. It's still important to have a little bit of all these factors in. I don't want to say that it's not important at no matter what your age or kind of what your goals are. But that I can't remember, it's on that sheet now, but basically you can tailor your workouts to what's a little bit more important to you, right? But it doesn't mean we should completely cut out like a zone 4 or a zone 5 because no, I don't need any power or quick movements or anything like that, because it's good to have broad ranges of variability amongst your kind of how hard your heart needs to function and how easy it needs to function. So that's why I said steady state has its place as well. Okay, so zone 5, this is all out efforts. Like this is a 10 to 15 second thing. Very hard. You have no breath, max effort. So this, again, we're in anaerobic here. So these are those intervals with short bursts. Here you want to do long rests. Okay, so this is where you see, maybe you see people at the gym, not usually our gym, but maybe at like a Gold Gym or something like that, where you saw them do like 1 or 2 reps and then they rest for 5 minutes. That's because they are truly trying to do a 1 or 2 rep maximum, and for your muscle to fully recover and lift that 1 rep, which you can barely do, it needs 5 minutes to recover to restore those quick burst energy stores. So that's kind of, there's not all, sometimes it's people just texting on their phone, don't get me wrong, but there is times where you do need, when it's an all out effort like that, to keep performing that all out effort multiple times, you do need that longer rest period. So those can be, even though you think of those short bursts of a 10-second thing, those workouts can become longer, because to truly be achieving that close to 100% 1 rep max, whether it's a sprint, a lift, whatever, you do need that recovery time. So those workouts can turn a little bit longer because they need so much rest time. So improving speed, reaction time, we talked about falls and stuff like that. Training your neuromuscular system, I like to think mind muscle connection. I know I talk about this in class a lot. Like when you're doing a chest press, are you feeling that chest squeeze those weights up, or are you just kind of doing the reps? Are you feeling your shoulders more? Being in touch with what you're feeling when you're doing your workouts is super important, and it can actually help you train whatever muscles you're trying to target a lot better when you can kind of, sometimes I close my eyes when I'm doing some reps. Am I feeling where I think I'm supposed to be feeling? And if I think I'm feeling it somewhere else, having TJ come look at my form or spot me or whatever, because maybe I'm cheating somewhere a little bit. So that's always a great thing. And this isn't just in zone 5. That's kind of an overarching theme. And then the last point there, utilize all muscle fibers. So fast twitch, slow twitch. We're kind of emptying the reserves here when we do this. Okay. So finding your training zone, this is what I mentioned we would get to. Again, obviously having a smart device, super helpful here. But we can do old school palpation, right? Carotid artery, radial. Those are kind of the 2 easiest spots. But I think at this point, a lot of us have something that can help us. So finding your max heart rate, again, if you want a true exact max heart rate, you got to go and get like a lab test where you're going to sit on a treadmill and wear a mask, and it's going to be super intense. Some good estimation, easiest one, 220 minus your age. That one's been around for a long time. It's fine. A little bit more specific, this one's a bit newer for a formula. Take your age, multiply it by 0.7, and then subtract that from 208. So 208 from minus whatever number you get by your age times 0.7. Okay. So that's going to give you your max heart rate, basically how many beats per minute your heart can do at most. Okay. And then finding your training zone. So pretty self-explanatory for that for method one, right? If again, straightforward. Let's say you want to train in 80% for today. You want to be in that maybe zone 3, zone 4 area. Take that max heart rate you just calculated, times it by the percentage, right? So times it by 0.8, right? 0.7. Method two, this one is a little bit better because it takes into account your resting heart rate and works that into the equation. So in general, the lower your resting heart rate, kind of the better your cardiovascular system is working. You'll see some elite athletes that get down to like 40 beats per minute when they're sleeping and stuff like that. So generally 60, I think I want to say is average. The population, general population average for resting heart rate. So because that takes it into account, it does give the formula a little bit better chance to be more accurate because, like I said, your resting heart rate can be a pretty good predictor of what your cardiovascular fitness is. So whereas like your max heart rate, it's basically just taking your age. It doesn't care how fit you are, right? Whereas this one, it does take your resting heart rate into account, which is, like I said, a decent predictor of your fitness. So taking that max HR by either of those calculations, subtracting your resting heart rate. So resting heart rate, same thing. We can do carotid. Your devices usually tell you your resting heart rate as well. So resting heart rate, just if you've been sitting at your desk for a while or you just been sitting there watching TV, not stressing out or anything, there's obviously variables. Did you drink caffeine? Were you working on a hard project at work? Those could change it. But in general, when you're just sitting at TV, not thinking about anything besides what's on TV, that's a great time to check your resting heart rate and get a number there. So max heart rate minus the resting heart rate. Take that number, get the percentage. Okay. So again, maybe we want to be in the 80%. So we're in the 80% zone 4. So times it by 0.8. And then we're going to add your resting heart rate back in after you take it from the quotations there. Okay. Training recommendations. So kind of like I mentioned earlier, we're all going to have different training recommendations because we have different goals. Okay. It depends on your goals, but also I don't want to take for granted what you enjoy. If you don't enjoy sprinting for 20 seconds in an all-out effort, like it is our job to make you a little uncomfortable, right? But if it's not what you enjoy, it's never going to be part of your routine other than maybe once every once in a while. So endurance athletes spending more time in that zone 2, zone 3. If you're looking for a little bit of speed and power training, spending more times in zone 4 and 5 are going to be great for you. These also can help you recognize areas of improvement. So if you feel like you're lacking that endurance, let's train in the zone 2 and the zone 3. Okay. But like I said at the beginning, all these zones have their place and are beneficial for your overall cardiovascular health and just your overall health. So ACSM recommendation for adults is at minimum 150 minutes of moderate intensity. So that would be 5 days a week, 30 minutes at least, or 75 minutes of vigorous intensity exercise. So vigorous is when you're getting into that zone 4 or 5 range. Just for a little bit of guidance there. But that's all going to change too, depending, is your goal weight loss, right? Because weight loss is an equation, right? Calories in, calories out. Okay. So there's a lot more that goes into it a little bit when it comes to what your goals are. I just wanted to touch on other strategies before, because obviously there's more than just working out that goes into your heart health. And that's why, we got the Heart Healthy Trail Mix. And then I wanted to touch on the next slide. On Thursday, the cafeteria is going to offer like a heart healthy meal. It's going to be a lemon dill salmon with a wild rice pilaf and some veggies. At our table, we'll have a sign as kind of why this is heart healthy. And then they're also going to be giving out a heart healthy granola bar sample that they made, and we'll have the recipe for that as well. So again, I only touched on the fitness aspect, right? Here's just a short little couple other ones. We could go into nutrition for days and days with TJ. So reach for red. This is kind of a generalization, but red foods generally support the circulatory system, so blood flow. So adding strawberries, tomatoes, beets, cranberry juice, all great things for blood flow and heart health. Getting more sleep. having that inadequate amount of sleep, not getting enough sleep, can increase levels of C-reactive protein, which is a marker of inflammation. And then, as we just discussed, any inflammation is an additional heart disease risk. So aiming for that 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. It's different for everybody, but we want to be in that range if we can. Laughing out loud. So research has showed that aside from reducing overall just stress levels, laughing can actually lower your if you have high blood pressure, can lower that high blood pressure by improving blood flow. So it's like it says here, listen to a funny podcast, go to a comedy show, watch a funny movie. Over time, people with high blood pressure can actually lower their blood pressure. Again, you can't just not work out and laugh a lot. It's not going to work, but it's a supplemental thing that is going to help. Okay. And then rocking out. So studies have also shown that listening to music, we get those releases of those good hormones in our brain that make us happy. This can release those endorphins that I just mentioned, that in turn reduce anxiety, reduce depression, and can increase blood flow by 26% compared to sitting there in silence. So if you're somebody who can work on stuff while listening to music and still be productive, that's a great thing to do as well. And then, yeah, I just touched on it, what we've got going on Thursday. So swing by the fitness center anytime from 11:30 to 1:30. Stop by 701 Fitness. We'll have a little explanation of what the cafeteria is serving, which is that lemon dill salmon. They'll have that heart healthy granola bar that they made. We'll have kind of some ingredients of that and the benefits of that. And then if you want the recipe from TJ for this trail mix, you liked it, we'll have a thing for that too as well. And so yeah, samples of, you want some more trail mix because you liked it, you can have some of that. And if you want to try the cafeteria's homemade granola bar, we'll have that available as well. All right. That's all I got.